What I usually say when I share in the fellowships that I'm a part of is that I didn't drink or use drugs in high school because I didn't know it would help. No one told me. I was 17, I was visiting colleges, and I got a drink bought for me by a very attractive person, and I could breathe, and I could relax, and could be the person that I always thought I could be around people. The way that I lived life, I was always uncomfortable in my own skin, found it hard to breathe, had a lot of social anxiety. Son of immigrants, in a place where my parents had trouble with the language. I didn't speak English until I was 5. It was a very lonely place, and it was a very hard place, and my first addiction was books. When I came out, I was 16, it was really traumatic, and I really felt like I was going to burn in hell forever, and that a loving God would put me there. There's another mature kind of disillusionment that takes place later that has to do with really coming to terms with the history of the violence and the racism and the way that certain people evangelized. So I was a really militant atheist for a long time, in college especially. I found no use for devout people. They were really hateful. Alcohol and drugs gave me what I needed when I needed it. And so when I wanted to feel like I could breathe and be social, like I drank and I became the person that I always wanted to be. And then it was all about getting more and more and more. After a certain time, it changed and it turned on me, and it became something that I became a prisoner of. And what I was really looking for was something holy, something real, something that loved me.
Are we all set to go?
Yep.
I will follow you.
I met Jim in a meeting, and when he speaks, something in me resonates with it. And I tend to have a really good bullshit meter.
I was in the gutter, literally out in front of the Eagle, south of Market, with blood on my face because I tripped over my feet, piss in my pants, and I had this moment of clarity. And I went into AA, and then I was just astounded by its authenticity. And I think real spirituality demands that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Am I safe? Yeah, yes, crossing.
He had mentioned in a conversation in passing that he was really curious about John of the Cross, this 16th century Discalced Carmelite. And so I was like, I think it would be really cool to get to know Jim. And my sponsor at the time said, go ahead, ask him. So I brought my collected works of John of the Cross, and I sat there and I would read to him once a week. And we'd read and we'd talk about recovery and we'd talk about spirituality. And I didn't have to pretend to be anyone in front of him.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate.
I move effortlessly back and forth between Christianity and 12-step and Hinduism and specifically Advaita Vedanta, a non-intellectual path for intellectuals.
The great gift of India is they have developed the technology of spiritual experience. Life as most of us living it is suffering. The cause of my suffering, number 2, is my craving. Freedom from craving is freedom from suffering. Then the question is there a way to be permanently free?
Tyaktva bahi prasarastam antaprasaranodhyata, completely restraining or stopping the mind within for a little while by giving up its outward moving nature, and intent on going inward to the core of one's being. See your own self by your own being, arrived at by stopping all mental perception.
Yes, so this is how it's done, the methodology. And when the craving stops, it feels so good. Nothing's gonna touch me. It's all okay. The world is unfolding as it should.
There's so much suffering. So many people are in such pain. And because of how I was raised and the commitments that I have, it feels wrong to ignore that.
Where did I ever say to ignore that?
So what do you do with it?
To see as God sees is to see the suffering of others as if it were my own. And that doesn't mean we don't act.
Mm-hmm.
But it does change the way we act. I never, ever say, do not work for justice. Do not work for peace and love.
Some people talk as though the United States were incapable of acting effectively in international affairs without risking war or damaging those we seek to help.
When Reagan funded a certain kind of violence in my country, my parents left that country and came here to the very country where a lot of that destabilizing violence was coming from. And then for me to become someone addicted to drugs that flow forth through that country so that I'm contributing with my usage money that goes back to people who are making life unlivable in the country where I came from is a really, really sad other cycle.
This is a dinner with Mauricio and me and my brother. I believe it's like a month before we got married or 2 months before we got, something like that. You were never quiet or still or nothing. You were doing always something. And here we're trying to, stop you because you were doing something with my mother and me. I love this picture because I can see your cheeks. And here, these are the three brothers. My uncle, the priest in the middle, and my father, the oldest, and the second one here. My uncle is the small one. So they all bully him, okay? And because he was the most intelligent and charismatic, so they probably resented that. But he's a physician, and my father, who's a banker, and he was the priest. So they had this thing going on of, who's better than the other all the time. This is my uncle, the priest. His name is Daniel, and this is his days in the seminary. This is him, and these are two of his best friends, Latin Americans who were studying abroad.
And then he came back to El Salvador. And when he came back, they put him in a parish in Chalatenango, in the eastern side of El Salvador, in the mountains.
These friends in El Salvador were involved in liberation theology in those days. I think that he started to get involved with, baptizing the kids from the guerrilla, which are people, so he was just being the priest of everybody.
He worked with people and, did the weddings and did the baptisms and did the funerals. And in that area, there were a lot of people that were politically very active. He treated everyone the same. Some people didn't like that, and they wanted to move him.
They were eliminating any young, modern Catholic who will accept all these people, no matter who they are. They just wanted the priest and the clergy to go with the government, and he wasn't gonna do that. The campesinos realized that he was gonna be taken away from them. They kidnapped him in the church, and they didn't wanna let him go. So when the government picked him up, he was already very sick. I believe that there was a condition before that. So when he was released, he died a month after.
The way that the story is told when I was growing up is that he died of rage. He died of rabia. He was just angry. And I don't think that that's entirely true. I think he drank a lot. And I think that when we tell the stories of our ancestors, we have to be true to them. I think he was a lot like me. I think he drank. And I think he found comfort in that. And so claiming him as a kind of ancestor has been really important for me.
Keith Walu wrote a book. Y'all read Introduction in Chapter 5. He wrote an incredibly important book on pain and is one of these, towering figures in the field that has done the homework for you. And
I got into the PhD program in Christian spirituality at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. When I went in, my main goal was to do addiction recovery as liberation theology. And I started reading theologians, sociologists, and the conversations that were going on about substance use disorder and people didn't match my experience in the world. And I found my way to anthropology and medical anthropology. And these were people who seemed to be having subtle and robust and interesting conversations, and it really felt true to me. Now that I have another field that I'm accountable to, I can say whatever I want. I'm not afraid that some bishop's gonna get angry or that some board of trustee is going to get upset at the way that I talk about Catholicism, that I talk about my tradition.
narcotic spirituality is a complacent attitude that seeks comfort above commitment. It is a willingness and eagerness to outsource virtue. I don't get to outsource my honesty. Why am I having somebody else be just? Justice is not something I outsource. I stand here as the son of Salvadoran immigrants who received amnesty in the 80s, as a queer person, and as someone in recovery from active addiction. At any given time, my identity has been made illegal.
Ven, espíritu, y vino como empezamos, ¿eh? Afinen, por favor. Chicas.
I'd like to invite you to consider that one of the things that got us here is this core belief that someone with a gun will solve my problems by putting bodies in cages.
I don't know if it was Moses or Aaron who ultimately spurred the rest of the community to get up and march. Where I think the inspiration came from was from the women. And this is what the story doesn't tell. But who do you think remembered what it felt like to have their children ripped from their arms? Who do you think said, you all think this is gonna get better? If we stay here, I don't wanna relive that. I remember what it felt like to have my baby torn from my arms, and I'm not gonna relive that memory. We are being called, we are being stirred by God to do something better and greater than what we're doing today.
It was very powerful to be surrounded by so many people who had come from so far away to cross the bridge. There were lots of people who had never done it, and so it was really important to sort of accompany them to this one place, to hear people speak, to speak to the families. We were able to move through and to feel deeply, deeply ambivalent about it because we were guests.
The families that you're going to meet are very brave. In many ways, they're superheroes because they've decided to stand up and advocate for their own rights.
To learn the violence that they face every day, and to be respectful of how they need to survive.
The systematic oppression that's been done to these black and brown bodies like for so long, and how we see like slavery and oppression even like happening today. So the question is like, how do you stay focused on these goals of like undoing all of it when it's like, it's hard for me to even imagine a world where that could exist.
Sometimes when I talk to my colleagues who are Protestant, they feel empowered. And the Catholics that I organize with are afraid because they feel like they need to ask for someone's permission. Okay? So figuring out what you can do without worrying about permission, just do it, right? Remember that bishops have never been at the forefront of social movements. They have responded to the body of Christ.
We are Catholics. We know that an unjust system will fail. If we refuse to cooperate.
It was because I identified as gay that I felt that I didn't belong in the church, right? So I left. I came back through beauty, and I came back through mysticism, and I came back through people that seemed to be in love with the language of contradiction and beauty and struggle and strangeness. John of the Cross, any of these figures that, you know, are very much of their time, but are trying to speak to something that is unsettled and unsettling. Nothing that the bullies can say will make me leave the church. It's my church. They don't get to decide what it is. You know, I was born and raised Catholic, and I'm not going anywhere.